Hey, everybody. I'm Sarah Lima. Welcome to this session. I'm a project director with Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service, also known as CITES. You'll hear a few acronyms today, but we'll do our very best to keep it non-acronym for the whole team. I'm very pleased to welcome you to our behind the scenes program, Participatory Resources for Girlhood. It's Complicated, an up close look. I have several collaborators who are here with me today, and I'm going to introduce them in a moment, but I want to give you a little bit of background. So our goal for what we're going to do together today is to present and hear your feedback about some resources that we've created to connect formal and informal learning educators with the content of the exhibition, Girlhood, It's Complicated. This exhibition went on display in 2020 and will be on display through 2023 at the National Museum of American History, another acronym, NMAH. So this exhibition looks at roles that young girls have had in influencing 200 years of American history. And it also looks at girlhood as a uniquely political social construct. The exhibition was strongly supported by the Smithsonian American Women's History Initiative, which supports projects that educate and create and disseminate and amplify the historical accomplishments of American women. And this is an initiative that's brought on because the Smithsonian wants the role of women in American history to be well-known, accurate, acknowledged, and empowering. And so we're really proud that we've gotten to be a part of this effort. Along with the exhibition, after it closes at the National Museum of American History in 2023, this exhibition is going to tour North America for 2.5 years. And as our team worked to develop the show, we always knew that we would want to develop materials that would support not only educators in Washington, D.C., but who might visit the exhibition or reference it in their classrooms, but also educators across North America. And all of those aspirations were in play before we faced down a pandemic, but now that that is our reality, it's even more salient that these resources reach as many people as possible. So the team developed a very strong web presence for the show, which you can reference immediately. I think we have some links going into the chat bar about that. And there's also many deeper dives that have been created by various interpretive teams associated with the exhibition, and especially with National Museum of American History. So part of what we're hoping to do today is to hear from you after we have a chance to introduce you to these resources about what we might do to make these resources as effective as we can for educators across the United States, teaching in a variety of classrooms, a variety of settings, at a variety of age levels and ability levels. And we hope that we'll be able to encourage you to participate using chat and Q&A, but also we're going to use a Jamboard on Google in order to get some reflections from you as we go along. So that'll probably happen later on in the session, but we're going to give you the link now, and we're asking you to go in and sort of give it a shot and populate that. So I think we have a split screen right now showing the Jamboard, and Carol Bossert has shared a link in the chat that will allow you to potentially use that throughout the session to share your reflections on some questions that we posed to you, or generally about about the resources that we're presenting. A few more words about the technical aspects of the webinar before we move forward with our presentations. So during the course of our presentation, we'll have 2 chat facilitators you've already met. Carol Bossert is one of them. Carol is a program manager for Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Services with me. And later on, Abby Pfisterer, education specialist from National Museum of American History, will also join us. And then we're looking at questions that are posed in the Q&A section, and we're going to be posing those to 2 of our speakers, Eden Cho of National Museum of American History and Mayela Caro of the National Museum of American History. I think you've already seen the announcement that this program is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available on the registration page in the coming days. Closed captioning is available. Just click on the closed caption button on your screen and captions will appear. If you have comments, please use the chat box. Send your comments to everyone to spark conversation, and if you have questions for our presenters, you can enter those into the Q&A. And as noted before, we're going to use a feature called Google Jamboard to seek your feedback. So please, looks like people are already starting to populate the Jamboard with their locations. Thank you so much for your participation. Let's see. One other thing is if you have any technical issues related to today's discussion, Carol Bossert has graciously agreed to help out with tech. So please type into the chat box and she will assist you. So with those details outlined, I'm going to go over the agenda with you. All right. So what we're going to do at a glance is we'll get an overview of 2 projects by Mayela Caro, the Girlhood 3D Fashion Digitization Project and the Latinas Talk Latinas program. And then we'll get an overview of 2 other resources, the Transcription Center for Teens and Girlhood Leadership and Learning by Eden Cho. And then we'll have some Q&A and we will also go to the Jamboard. So our 2 speakers, Mayela Caro is Curatorial Assistant of Political and Military History for National Museum of American History. She'll present on those 2 programs that I mentioned. And the Latinas Talk Latinas program was designed to bring audiences stories of influential Latinas as told through the perspectives of Latinx Smithsonian Institution researchers, curators, and scientists. The Digitization Program Office project will show what has been done with some textiles from the Girlhood exhibition in order to make them accessible for audiences worldwide. Eden Cho is Education Specialist for National Museum of American History's Education and Impact team, and she will present projects and outcomes of several initiatives that her team has quarterbacked in support of the exhibition at National Museum of American History. And we'll also post a link in chat to Smithsonian's History Explorer site where lots of these initiatives can be accessed. So there's going to be lots of overviews of these items, and then hopefully we'll be hearing from you throughout the presentation. Let's see. If we, I've gone over the whole agenda with you. So let's go ahead and move right into Mayela giving us a presentation of her resources, and then we will move on to Eden.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to share with you some of our resources surrounding one of our newest exhibits. The title is Girlhood, It's Complicated. It opened on October 9th of last year in 2020, just in time for the International Day of the Girl. This exhibition is part of the American Women's History Initiative, as Sarah mentioned, which is designed to ensure the inclusion of women's history at the Smithsonian. And also the exhibit commemorates the anniversary of women's suffrage, and it does so by exploring the concept of girlhood in the United States. And this concept of girlhood is somewhat different from like girl power. So young women often hear that girls are made of, sugar and spice and everything nice, that girls are uncomplicated, that they have no agency and don't have a political voice because they are too young to vote. However, history tells us otherwise. Much like the suffragists over 100 years ago, girls have always had a voice, if not a vote, and they use their voices to affect change throughout American history. So the thesis of the exhibit and the overarching message that we are trying to convey through the exhibit is that although girls have often been overlooked in history books, really girls have a long history of political and social action and have made an impact in American history through their work, fashion, and political and social activism. So the exhibit is roughly 500 square feet. Oh, Sarah, could you please go back to the first one? Thank you. It's there's a little 3D markup up here, but it's about 500 square feet and has 203 objects from across the Smithsonian's collections. And the girlhood design and aesthetic is inspired by magazines and zines. It has 13 custom murals by artist Crystal Quiles, and you can see a sample of one of those murals in this slide right here. This is, the aesthetic of girlhood picture here. Okay, next slide, please. So girlhood is organized into 5 thematic sections. We want to show how girls have changed US history in politics, education, work, health, and fashion. And additionally, we have a series of rotating and new acquisitions called A Girl's Life. And each of these stories that's represented in the series, A Girl's Life, offers a window into a particular girl's life and how she made history. Right here, we have some examples of the objects found in each section, but this is really the tip of the iceberg in terms of the content and the amount of objects and images that each section holds. Most of our objects have really deep and important backstories, but in the interest of time, I will focus on just 2 of these. So on the left, we have Naomi Wadler's scarf. Naomi Wadler was only 11 years old when she gave her speech for March for Our Lives to End Gun Violence in front of hundreds of people, thousands of people, at the National Mall. Naomi Wadler had one day to write her speech. She came home from school on a Friday and worked very hard until bedtime. And then when it came time to pick out an outfit, Naomi and her mom kept, bickering back and forth because Naomi wanted to wear all black. But her mother thought that she needed to wear a bright color to pop in front of the cameras. So her aunt, Leslie Wadler, came up with a great compromise and knitted this orange scarf here, and orange represents gun violence awareness. And she knitted this scarf while watching 2 movies the night before the speech, and so she called it a 2-movie scarf. And since her speech, Naomi has become a face of American activism. So it's very important. This scarf is very symbolic for girls to have a political voice, even though they're too young to vote, and it is in our exhibit. On the far right, we have Helen Keller's watch, and this is part of a girl's life section. So Helen Keller was born in 1880, and since the age of 19 months was deaf and blind. So most images of Helen Keller depict her as a demure, proper, wealthy Southern girl. But in reality, and you might not have guessed it until you read her writing, she wrote very fiery speeches on inequality, about women's suffrage, workers' rights. And this watch, Keller received this watch in 1892 when she was 12 years old. And it is called a touch watch because it allowed her to tell the time by feeling the pins around the edges. If you can see in the number marks, there's little pins. So she could just feel like it was 1, 2, 3. And since Helen Keller kept a busy schedule, this was one of her most treasured possessions for most of her life. Please move on to the next slide. So another component of our exhibit is to be able to digitize objects in 3D so more people can view these lovely objects up close and personal, but as close as you can get virtually. And we are doing this through our digitization program office, or it's called DPO for short. We are currently in phase 2 of 3D digitization for girlhood. In the first phase, we worked with Smithsonian DPO to scan 18 pieces of clothing that appear in the exhibition upon opening. And this included amazing objects such as Minnie Jim Brown Trickey's high school graduation dress, which was seen in the previous slide, Isabella Ayuki's Cornwell's prom dress, and an apron from a 9-year-old mill worker. Phase 2, which you see right here, is taking place now and will scan almost 40 costumes that cover topics such as Title IX, Asian American girls, and additional pieces of clothing from the exhibition, including a dress worn by Veronica Davila to compete in Escaramuza events, which are these female equestrians in the US and Mexico, and they'll be featured in a new case. So this process of digitization pulls together a range of different staff and skills, including collections managers, curators, conservators, and the digital professionals at the DPO. And what you're seeing here in these process photos is called photogrammetry, where a professional photographer takes hundreds of still photos of the costume. Some complicated pieces require 80 to 1,000 still images. And these are taken from the bottom up and 360 degrees around the object. Then the data is processed and the images are knitted together by computers to create a 3D model. So once the models are ready, curators and conservators annotate them so that users can uncover their often hidden histories. And these annotations address who wore them, why are they historically significant, and how they are constructed as objects. Some of the 3D models from Girlhood have been turned into augmented reality models, meaning that you can view them as holograms from your phone. So it's so cool. And really all of this allows teachers and students to explore these pieces of material culture in a virtual environment and bring the Smithsonian collections into the classroom if you can't make it to DC. Let's go to the next slide. So this series was created by Magdalena Mieri, who is the director of the program in Latino History and Culture at NMAH. We are currently on season 2 of the Latinas Talk Latinas series. In season 1, the series curators, scientists, and educators across the Smithsonian introduce you to the lives of 10 Latinas among, for example, Celia Cruz, Selena, Clotilde Arias, and Yosa Costello, among many others. And these videos explore stories of labor organizing, fashion, music, science exploration, performance, and art that have shaped the United States. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this Latinas Talk Latinas is presented by curator and professor Dr. Mireya Loza, and it showcases the life and work of Jessica Govea. Jessica Govea was a labor leader and organizer who started at a very young age. She began working alongside Cesar Chavez in the Community Service Organization and was later instrumental in the founding of the United Farm Workers Union, which extended in extending her organizing power all the way to Canada. So as a girl, as a child. Let's move on to the next slide. And the final slide shows the learning lab. So the Latinas Talk Latinas series, the video is always accompanied by digital educational resources that enhance learning about these featured women. The Learning Lab is a free interactive platform where students can learn further about a particular person or topic through the objects in our collection, as well as other resources outside of the museum. The Learning Labs are also accompanied by a series of thinking routines that allow students to critically engage with the primary sources and then learn through the objects. And with this, I'm going to send it back to Sarah for the next part of our program.
Ayala, thanks for that whirlwind overview of some amazing resources. And thank you also for giving us an overview of Girlhood. If anybody has questions about the Girlhood exhibition as well as those resources, please feel free to post them in the chat or reflect on them on the Jamboard. Yes, Eden, we'd love to hear from you now about all of the different prongs of educational programming and engagement you have been spearheading around Girlhood for the last year and then some.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. It's so good to spend Educators Day with you all. So I'll be discussing 2 projects that our team worked on that supported Girlhood. It's complicated. So the first, we collaborated with the Transcription Center. The Smithsonian's Transcription Center was developed as a collaborative way to digitally enable and increase public engagement with Smithsonian materials, and also increase access and use of our digitized content and create pathways of learning and knowledge. It's a crowdsourcing project because we do have volunteers who transcribe real archival materials like journals, letters, documents, notes. If there's text on it, it's transcribed. So the Transcription Center for Teens project team wanted more teachers and students to utilize transcription and transcribed materials in the classroom, hence Transcription Center for Teens. So we worked with 5 secondary teachers from the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area who worked in various learning environments. They advised the creation of the Educational Toolkit, a guide to using the Transcription Center in the classroom. And if you haven't caught on by now, I'll be saying various forms of the word transcription a lot today. Can we go to the next slide, please? They advise that we include and clarify the various ways someone can use the transcription center: transcribe, review, and investigate. So someone can transcribe the archival materials, review what has been transcribed, or use the transcribed documents to support their research. So what does this have to do with Girlhood? Part of the funding we received meant we could digitize some of the archival materials from the exhibit and add it to the Transcription Center website to be transcribed, such as Minnie Jean Brown's suspension letter, which is included in the exhibit. It also meant we could improve the capabilities of how transcribed materials appear on Learning Lab with the transcribed language, so that viewers would be able to see Minnie Jean Brown's suspension letter on one side of a split screen and the transcribed language on the other side. So for all these reasons, it felt natural for us to not only create a downloadable PDF for teachers and students to use, but to also house this educational toolkit on Learning Lab, an educational platform. And then after the toolkit was finalized, one of the teachers on the teacher advisory group created 2 Learning Lab collections exemplifying how transcription could be used in a lesson plan. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the second project I supported was called Girlhood Leadership and Learning. We worked with a local all-girls public school in Washington, D.C. This project, like Transcription Center for Teens, started out in person in 2019, but during the pandemic was transitioned to a fully virtual program, and it was also extended for another school year. So the first year we worked with a cohort of 10 middle school students, and the second year we worked with a cohort of 5 who built upon the hard work from the first year students. We went through many of the objects and stories that are seen and told in the exhibit, like Naomi Wadler's scarf. And then we asked the students what girlhood meant to them, because like the title implies, it's about girlhood and learning, but there's also leadership. So we're pretty straightforward with our project names here. Next slide, please. When we asked, sorry, one before. When we asked the students what girlhood meant to them, thank you, Sarah. So when we asked the students what girlhood meant to them, we wanted their research to align with their interests and for it to be truly student-led. So some of the scholars researched well-known figures they had already learned about in school, like Ida B. Wells. Others researched role models their age, like Marley Dias, an activist who started the campaign #1000 Black Girl Books. And others wanted to include current stories they were deeply impacted by, like Breonna Taylor. Next slide, please. They created Learning Lab collections, also thematically as represented in the Girlhood exhibit. And Carol will drop the links in the chat so that you can see the students' research. And as you peruse, you'll be able to see an additional aspect of their project, which were video components. We asked the students to create a video tutorial geared for other teens on how to navigate and use Learning Lab as a platform. They worked with the video producer to write the script, audio and video record, choose the music, review, edit, review again. And then the second video is an interview with their school principal. So the students asked to interview someone who they thought fit into the 5 themes of girlhood so that they could include that video and interview into their Learning Lab collections. And our last slide, please. And with the permission of their school principal, the students were able to gather and present to their teachers and family members back in June. So what I really enjoyed about working on these 2 projects at the same time, both on Girlhood, was the use of Learning Lab as a multifaceted tool. So in one project, Learning Lab was used by teachers as a lesson planning tool. And in another project, it was used by students as a research project and presentation tool. And I really enjoyed watching Mayella's presentation as well, because it's such a wonderful through line of how we've been able to work with a museum exhibition and create so many wonderful creative educational projects that's come out of it. And I will turn it back to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Eden. Thanks, both of you. Terrific to hear about all of these resources. So at this point, we would love to shift to a bit of Q&A with folks. I do notice that it's been mostly Carol and I in the chat, and I just want to welcome everybody to join the chat if you'd like to get some chatter going there. We also welcome you to continue to share reflections in Jamboard, or even start to jam on some of the questions that we posted in Jamboard in the hopes of hearing from you. You don't really have to wait for our prompts to do that. So we'd love to see you start posting stickies there, or or join us in the chat with some additional questions. I think I heard from Carol that there weren't any questions in the Q&A, but I do have a question for our presenters, and I'd love to hear from them. So, for Mayella and for Eden, what are the most surprising adaptations that you observed when you were working with educators this past year, that were things that you might have not anticipated that they would need, and sort of had to come up with some solutions to accommodate and to figure out a good way forward for providing them with educational resources?
Thank you. That's a great question. Well, for us, definitely was the access to objects and to the girlhood content. We heard from educators early on that, they had field trips planned to DC, or even if they didn't, they wanted to know how to incorporate the content of girlhood into their classrooms, even though we were closed. So the DPO, the digitalization program, was instrumental in we really made that a more robust program to be able to bring more objects available. And it's so beautiful to see students from all over the country and all over the world to be able to have really close personal access to these objects that you wouldn't otherwise until you got to the museum in person. And then the second thing has been our online presence through our website. And being able to have as much content. It's really difficult to take a 3D exhibit and put it into a website. So as best as possible, we've been trying to really highlight the objects and the stories of girlhood. And we've heard some really great stories from folks across the country of how they've been able to use these resources in their classrooms. So we're thrilled to hear that.
Thanks. How about you, Eden?
I mean, this is something that we all knew, but always just pleasantly surprises me is just how creative teachers are, and how much they will do for their students. I know from working with teachers and students this past year, like screen fatigue is real. Like going into breakout rooms by yourself just for like a 5-minute break is real. But these are the fact that even through all of that they are willing to learn new skills, work with us, work with museum educators, pick up new online digital tools like Jamboard and Padlet and Learning Lab. I think that's just been one of the best parts of 2020 and 2021. I think what I really hope for through all this work is that what some of the resources that we've created could be helpful to educators. And if they're not, that we are also able to improve upon our work, and that we can continue to collaborate with educators so that we are serving the audience that we want, that we're working with.
Hey, Sarah, it's Carol. There's a question here. I think it's for Eden, but I think any of you could answer it. In these transcription projects that you were doing, and maybe you mentioned this, but was there a particular like age range or grade level that you were primarily focused on?
Yes, we were focused on secondary students, so middle and high school students. When we first began working on the project, what we heard from the teacher advisory group was our kids cannot transcribe. Like, this is a lot for them to take on at that age. They were really honest too about their feedback and said Transcription Center is a tool that we would most likely be able to use as like the investigation portion. So I would love to be able to access like already transcribed documents that students would be able to use as primary sources as part of a research project. And when we were all in quarantine, that's what we saw. We saw an increase in a lot of college students, and like maybe like a lot of senior high school students who were looking to transcribe as part of like as service hours or as practice, as something to do while they were home. And we saw a lot of teachers using the Transcription Center as for a lot of the review or investigation portion.
We had a really nice comment in the chat from Melissa Lima from Texas, and it dovetails off of what you've just been talking about, Eden, with adaptation. Melissa talks about being really excited about wanting to get back to hands-on activities, but that the virtual field trips have been a real coup. And I'm curious from both of your perspectives, but Mayela, especially since you've been working closely on this, like what are some really exciting ways that AR has been played with in classroom settings? And Melissa, feel free to tell us what age group you're teaching as well.
Yes, well, we've heard actually from some faculty members at University of Texas Austin how they've been able to use the fact that they can really zoom in to these objects to be able to discuss them. For example, Minnie Jane Brown's not I was gonna say wedding dress, graduation dress, to be able to really zoom in. And she talked about how her students were able to discuss how they didn't know how detailed and how wonderfully, beautifully curated this dress was and how beautifully made it was until they were able to use the 3D process, because they were able to zoom in. And before this, they had only seen the dress in photos, in black and white photos mostly. And then they were able to see, and then they noticed that like, oh, the dress has little yellow flowers and it's made in such a different, with this different material that we didn't expect. They were able to see how this dress was curated by her, the different meanings that it brought. And they were able to do this compare and contrast in terms of textiles and images of these beautiful dresses. Another way too that we thought was really great was using the aprons of girls who worked in factories, and to be able to discuss how the size of the apron, and one thing is to see the images of the girls working in the factories, and another one is to see the tiny little apron full of dust and full of oil, and how they were able to put an object to a face essentially, and it is able to humanize their stories a little bit more. So they were using the objects in their stories to embed into, what's the word I'm looking for, to expand or go deeper into these histories. I think it was quite beautiful. That's one way for sure.
Well, and Eden, it makes me think about close reads on historical sources and close object work, and those two things together too. So I don't know whether you found something similar with the transcription project.
Yeah, and I love what you said, Maela, about like looking at the dress is kind of its own primary source in its own of being able to see like the stitching or being able to see the embroidery without having it in your hands, and being able to sort of run your hands through those details. And I think that's what we strive for, right? Not just in looking at documents and text as primary sources, but also being able to really relive history through these stories, and through objects.
Thanks for those responses, guys. We did have one more question. The question was, how many cities are scheduled for the traveling exhibition? How are those cities selected? And when does the digitized collection open? So I can answer the questions about the tour. It's slated for 6 cities at this time. And we don't have all of the cities defined at this time, but we have lots of them that are interested and are in the process of finalizing their agreement to host. So that is in process. It's a process where the host site would get in touch and say that they're interested, and then we would work through the details of making sure that they can safely display the exhibition and that they can display the whole of it so that the story is cohesive. And then we plan with them for that part of the tour. And as far as the digitized collection, Maela, I think you have the details on that.
The first phase is up on our website. You can, in our website, you're able to see a lot of those beautiful images, including the Minnie Jean Wadler dress. You can see it. You can, oh my gosh, Minnie Jean Wadler. I'm getting confused with these amazing girls. Minnie Jean Brown. You can see a lot of those already available on the Girlhood website. And as we mentioned, the second phase is in the process right now, literally as we speak. They're digitizing that now, and it should be up, soon, within the next year for sure.
Excellent. Well, that was great to hear from you guys, and we'll do more Q&A after the Jamboard if we have time for it. But we would like to turn it around and hear from you, our audience. Hopefully in chat or really on the Jamboard is where we'd like to work with you right now. I'm going to share my screen and show you the Jamboard and show you what we're going to do next. So. Okay, so I have the Jamboard pulled up. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can see this from the speaker end and make sure that that looks kosher. Okay. So thank you for populating the first page of the Jamboard, everybody. We're going to ask you to spend 90 seconds, hopefully roaming across the different questions that we've posted on the board in the hopes of hearing from you about some of the resources that we've presented today. And so you do that by scrolling here at the top with the arrows, and it takes you onto different boards. Somebody's already populated one. Thank you. So there are 3 questions that we've posted, and we've also posted a general. So the first question is, what types of resources would be best for bringing content from Girlhood It's Complicated into learning for different grades, and especially for lower grades? The second board asks, what types of resources would be best for bringing content from Girlhood It's Complicated into learning for students with disabilities? And the third board asks, what types of museum-related projects and resources would best fit into your learning environment? And we'd love to hear who your learners are. We also have an additional reflections board that you're welcome to populate for the rest of this presentation. Just any resources described today or new ideas for educator support materials. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to take 90 seconds to fill out a few stickies on whatever boards strike your fancy. And then after that, we're going to spend an additional 90 seconds dovetailing off of and riffing off of and roving off of each other's stickies and hopefully generate some ideas. Then we'll kind of look at the board together and see what we came up with. And we'll end it out with any additional reflections and Q&A from the team. And what we're really hoping is to take that feedback and take those reflections and those reactions and use them to continue to develop resources that we hope can benefit peer educators across the country as the exhibition tours. So we'll have some moments of silence or possibly some music playing while you are populating the board, and then we'll come back together. So please go ahead and get started responding on the Jamboard. Thank you. All right, folks, that's 90 seconds. I'm going to stop you there and invite you now to take a minute, go ahead and flip through, and then please go ahead and respond to other stickies or hit a board that you haven't hit before or share additional reflections with us. Just another 90 seconds to gather more feedback. And go ahead and go. All right, guys, that is 90 seconds. It went by really fast, but we have a lot of really great responses. Don't stop jamming, keep going. Please continue to write. But we are going to go live now, and we'll keep the board up while we do this. But we'd like to just reflect on the responses a bit. So I'm going to invite Eden and Mayela to start commenting on what they see on board one, and we'll go through these a bit.
Um, for so I did comment on someone's sticky note about gender specific programming, younger students, series of short videos. I did do like a small plugin of one of my other projects called History Time Videos. And I've tried to link the URL on one of the sticky notes, but we actually did do a feature of Minnie Jean Brown's dress. And each video, we do like a close observation of an object for our youngest learners. And then I love this one sticky note of like what boys were supposed to do. And I think someone also that wrote something about like gendered expectations for 4-3. And I see that Abby has joined us in the chat. So I wanted to like do like another quick plugin of a programming that you might have seen of like a hype video running today of something called the National Youth Summit. And this year the theme is gender equity. So we are inviting middle and high school students to come participate in a discussion on what the future of gender equity looks like to them. And we're having a lot of speakers come and join, be part of that programming. And one of them is actually Minnie Jean Brown. Basically, if Minnie Jean Brown is involved, we're involved. So that's just something that our team is really looking forward to, and we're really excited about. It's not too late to register, and you can hear Minnie Jean Brown talk herself. You can hear Naomi Watler talk. Yeah, I'm trying to remember a lot of the objects that are seen in Girlhood that people have generously donated, like Cindy Whitehead, Judy Oyama. They will also be a part of this event. So that was like a really nice, thank you everyone for basically setting me up to do all of my plugins. Mayela?
Yeah, so I see some comments about collaborative or doing things that are collaborative in nature, videos in that sense. And the Learning Lab can be very collaborative. So anybody could create their own learning lab, and it would be really nice to, create a learning lab based on whatever topic you want to research or study or go through with your students. So you can get it started and then have students input, objects, videos. It doesn't have to only be Smithsonian resources, although that's a great starting point. But you can essentially create in this learning lab a list of resources for students to learn how to use primary sources, to be able to think critically about an object, a person, an event. And so this can be collaborative in nature. It could be an assignment, it could be a class activity, and you would need access to a computer and internet to be able to do that. But that is one great way. And some of the best learning labs we've seen out there are some that are created by students in different grade levels. So that's a great way to do it. And the Learning Lab is a free platform. You can create your account and have as many learning labs as you'd like. So I encourage any of you looking for collaborative activities to do that. To use it. And it doesn't have to be collaborative. You can create your own learning lab with the objects that are relevant to your lesson plans and have your students go and see them. You can create questions and that have them force them to think critically, write little essays, create little quizzes. So it's very, very interactive. It can be collaborative or not.
You guys, thank you so much for taking a look at the reflections of our amazing participants. Thank you for adding to that Jamboard. The good news is you don't have to stop. So if you still have more ideas, we would love to hear them. We do have, our session is coming to an end at this point, but I'm sharing our information here. Please take a screenshot of it and reach out to us. Of course, this will all be available via video. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And we're really excited to hopefully